Welcome to the Culture Curators podcast. We're here to share insight, information, and resources to help you become a more effective salon business owner. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about leading through change and uncertainty. And let's face it, here we are. We're just a few weeks out of, a big event for the United States. And there's been a lot of change in the past couple of years, I would say specifically since COVID. And there's currently a lot of uncertainty that you may be thinking. You may be thinking about it in terms of your business. Your team may be thinking about it and or talking about it. And I certainly know that clients are coming in and discussing certain things such as the cost of going to the grocery store. There's a
Yeah,
lot of change and uncertainty right now.
absolutely. When it comes to interest rates and inflation and the election and, celebrities in the spotlight that are being arrested and that people that were revered, like seeing this whole other side. I mean, these are the kind of topics that are coming up every single day in the salon, no doubt. I mean, when you go to the grocery store and it's like, I always say, it's like I used to fill my trunk for the $150 that it cost. Now it's like one
A
bag that sits
bag.
on my front seat. Like it's just
It's not
crazy,
funny, but
right?
it's funny,
It's not funny, but it's just like, damn. And it's just, we're all experiencing this.
Yeah.
And that creates uncertain times. And clearly, an election is not going to directly affect not going to necessarily directly affect your business, so to say. Although maybe it could. I guess it kind of depends, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's really important to toe the line when it comes to what's discussed, what is, you know, um, encouraged on the salon floor, what type of rhetoric you're cool with as a salon owner and as a leader. And I think when it comes to change, it could be any kind of change that we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether it's change that's outside of your business or change within your business, it's how to navigate it and how to kind of handhold through it so that people are prepared as best possible with any kind of changes that come down the pipeline.
Yeah, exactly. And we just got a survey completed by a team, and one of the things that was resounding in the answers was that there's a lot of change going on right now within the structure of the business, and some clients are like, "Whoa, yet another change." And so I think that, although we started out talking broad, talking about world, talking about the United States, I think that there's also something that happens within the organization when there are changes that are made, or when there's two or three things that happen that impact the client. It could be positive or it could be negative.
Right.
Change is hard, regardless of how it is. So, how do we navigate that? How do you navigate that? How do you work with your team to reassure the client that it's okay, that here's the changes and we're going to move on past them?
Well, I think open and honest communication is always going to be my answer to many, many things. It's just being very real, honest, transparent, making sure that you're ahead of it as opposed to behind it. So if you have changes coming, whether it's pricing changes, two of the biggest changes that you can have within a salon could be possibly your software. If it's something technical, it could be your color line. If it's something that you use every day, it could be a product line that you're swapping one out for another. Those are some kind of sweeping changes that could happen. It could be something even bigger. Maybe you're moving locations, maybe talking about, from another episode, are you expanding? Maybe another location's opening. Maybe, people are coming and going. People have left. People are being rehired. All of these things fall under the obvious category of change, and they have varying degrees of how they impact everyone within the brand. And you as a leader, it's your job to kind of steady the ship.
Right.
So how do you get ahead of it? I think one of the most important things is to sit down with a pen and paper or whatever you do with your phone on a note and really start to think about what are the specific changes that are going to happen and then break them down into steps. We can kind of go back when you think about the pandemic and COVID, think about when your business was shut down, if you were in a state that was shut down.
Mhm.
Many of us had to strategize and kind of go step by step of what the reopening process looked like and then what changes were going to happen, whether it was how people needed to enter the salon, how people needed to operate during the salon, how people were going to pay. I mean, all of those things were things that you needed to be prepared for. And I would imagine that some were more prepared than others.
Right.
Right? So making sure that you're prepared and communicating it to your team is critical. And then, of course, communicating it to the client or the consumer if they're experiencing change on their side is a great way to make sure that you're always ahead of it. And so that when someone asks you about it, you can always reference the communication that was sent out via text or email or call or whatever, so that you have that as a safe landing spot for when maybe some people are hitting some challenges with the change.
Yeah. And I think, you know what? What about a change committee? What about having and enlisting some of your team members to come on board and talk about a change and talk about all the steps? I think it's really important that you first make this list, however you make a list in your phone or on paper and computer, whatever it is, of all the things around a change. And so a couple of changes that I have found to be really, really big within our industry is number one, software, which you mentioned. Number two, changing a color line. It's huge. And so when you think about software or a color line, one of the things that I automatically think about is do your due diligence. In other words, go out and start interviewing different software companies, different color lines, and finding out for color line, what is it that they have to offer in product, what is it that they have to offer in education, and what's their price point?
Right.
What is it that their current clients like about it? So maybe it's researching and reaching out to their existing clients, whether it's software or color, whatever. I'm just using those two as an example. Finding out and then narrowing it down to your top three. And then maybe if it is color or a product line, whatever it is, maybe it's bringing it in and having certain people do evaluations on it using that color brand, in seeing what it takes. And I'll tell you, most people underestimate the process of change, specifically like a software or color. Those are big, impactful changes within the organization. And software, every software company, I swear to God, tells you, oh, it's going to be seamless. We're going to drop in your clients. We're going to drop in the information, and it'll be effortless. And inevitably, what happens is it's a painful process.
It's never
It's
seamless.
it's never seamless. It's painful, and part of it is because it's not realistic what they're painting this picture it's going to be like. And second of all, I think it's because we didn't go through the due diligence or the entire process from A to Z on what it's going to look like, how it's going to roll out with the team, and what the team can expect, what they can expect, and what that learning curve is going to look like. Because change and uncertainty bring a learning curve, bring fear, and fear of the unknown is underlying in most everything that freaks people out.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the really important things is that you talk about some of the challenges that are expected to come ahead um, throughout the change so that you prepare people for some of those bumps in the road. You can't guarantee that the change that you're about to create is going to be seamless. It would be,
Hmm.
again, unrealistic.
Right.
So it's more like, so this will be a challenging process. Here's what we're prepared for, and here's how we're going to support you through the challenges. And here's what we need from you to help support us,
Mhm.
right? That might include patience and communication from their end so that they make sure that they're bringing up the ladder, or excuse me, up the chain of command. Hey, this is what the assistants are experiencing. This is what some of these level 1 or 2 or 3 stylists are experiencing. Here's what so and so is experiencing. Here's what our front desk, or if you still have one, is experiencing. So you can, again, it's just like having a soup to nuts kind of fail safe in a way. But the reality is, if you've ever copied and pasted just a simple document from, let's say, Google to Microsoft, or I mean, nothing just moves over perfectly.
No.
When we did a software conversion, it was it was as smooth as it could be, but the client notes are all over the place. I mean, there's just certain things that like don't connect in well because not all software speak the same language, of course.
Correct.
So you just have to be prepared for, like Jill said, if you're underestimating the change, then you're already making a mistake on the front end. So just know that like this is going to be really difficult. But the good news about these kind of changes we're talking about, they're very temporary.
They
right?
are.
There's other changes that might come about that are completely out of your control. These are changes that we're talking about that you are implementing yourself, obviously within your control. But how would we, if kind of shifting over a little bit, how would you lead through challenges that come up unexpectedly that you hadn't planned for? And I can't think of an example. I got to think of one, like a for instance, but just in general, how would you handle something that comes up unexpectedly that's a challenge?
Well, is it like an emergency? Is that what you're thinking? Like the water pipes bust? Or is it like we're seeing our expenses rise dramatically because of everything that's happening in the world? And so
Let's
we
say the
have,
latter.
okay, so we've maybe been watching our expenses for doing business rise. And so then we have to determine as a business owner, what is it that we're going to do with it? And really, I mean, off the top of my head, I'm thinking either I eat the cost or I have to pass the cost along. And most likely, I'm going to pass the cost along because that's what we're seeing everywhere, every industry doing it. It just doesn't matter. It's the price, the costs are being passed along to the consumer. So if that's the case, then I still have to go through everything. I have to look at the risk. What is the risk in um, implementing a price increase to cover the expenses that have increased? What does that look like? And not only what does that look like for me as a business owner, what does it look like for the team? And then what does it look like for the client? What's a reasonable amount that I need to increase? Am I going to, is the team going to get commission off that increase? Or is that something that the house is just going to have? I don't know. Um, how am I going to talk to the team about it? Because again, we know that raising prices is a fear of many, many service providers. So we have that fear for them that we have to talk about and we have to share that with them. If we're going to be passing on commission with that increase, that's one thing. If we aren't, how are we going to discuss that with them? How are we going to present it to them? How are we going to present it to the client? What's the best and most palatable way to do it? And like Derek said earlier, the truth in communication is simply good enough. You know, the truth is good enough, and I don't think we have to lie about what we're doing or why we're doing it. I don't think we have to give full disclosure to our clients or even sometimes our team, but I think that we have to think about how is it going to impact them and what is it that we can do that will be the least impactful in the least risk. However, the greatest risk to me is just absorbing all these costs because eventually we won't be able to absorb it and will go away. And that's the biggest risk of all is losing that business.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, when we think about change in general, let's shift away from let's say a financial change or like the solution to that to your scenario is obviously we got to raise prices somehow some way, right? Um Thinking more culturally as well, I think if you're having a shift in your culture within your culture, maybe there's a structural change that you're doing. Um, Maybe you're implementing a new process or new protocol, new expectations, something that shifts the accountability of people. These kind of things can ruffle some feathers. And I think you really need to be aware of what kind of trust you've built with your team in order to allow their trust to follow you through that change. And if you don't have that trust, if you don't have that credibility, it's going to be a lot more difficult all the way through.
Hmm.
A
Yeah.
lot more.
Yeah. So what kind of change would you be talking about with in that situation?
Well, a lot of time, let's say, for instance, you've been allowing certain patterns of behavior to happen multi levels, stylists and assistants. People are coming 1 minute before their client. They're walking in the back
Mm-hmm.
door. There's gossip happening in the back room. There is a lack of teamwork, a lack of effort. There is a dragging of the feet, so to speak, with tasks, and maybe certain tasks aren't getting done. Right. So you need to kind of do an overall reset to reset expectations, to redefine job descriptions, to re-clarify the accountability factor. These are hard things. So I want to give you like an illustration. You have been letting the rope out over a period of time, and the rope is so far out, there's no more tension left on the rope. It's just a wet noodle. And now you got to start pulling that rope back in. It is much harder to pull it back in than it is to let it go. And pulling it back in is a delicate thing. You can't pull it back in all at once. So you have to kind of slowly take methodical steps to do that. So, and I know I'm not giving well, I'm trying to be as specific as possible, but also cover what affects so many different people in so many areas. And I think a lot of times when we've allowed certain behavior to happen, we have to then go in and try to fix it and correct it. But you can't band-aid it. You have to almost like gut it and then restart from the bottom in a way in those areas. We've helped many of our clients do this. And even in those surveys you were talking about, whether it's recent surveys or surveys before, we'll hear that feedback. Well, wow, we're experiencing some change. And how they're responding to that change, I think, says a lot about the health and the overall attitude of the culture itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I just go back to, the truth will set you free, and it will, and the truth will set them free if they understand it. And if you're real and you're authentic and let them know this is uncharted territory that we're going through right now. And I'm going to do my best as your leader to navigate through this. I'm going to need your help, and we're going to get through this together. I think speaks volumes. It's the way in which you set the table, and then how you walk through it, and then how you clean it all up if
Yeah.
there's anything to clean up. So lot of things to think about, lot of uncertainty going on out there. We can control a certain amount of it, the rest we can't, and we need to learn how to impactfully and successfully navigate through the uncertainty.
Yeah, and I think kind of wrapping back around, coming full circle in this conversation, right? Because we started more big picture, right? Global, thought, not global. As far as, well, there is global uncertainty as well. Let's be real about that,
Absolutely.
right? It's not just what's happening in the U.S. with an election; it's what's happening with wars all over the place, and whether it's what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, whether it's what's happening with Israel and Gaza and Palestine, and all of the horrible things that are happening. When people are coming in right now, there's there's a rhetoric around all of the above, right? And then again, our Hollywood like being flipped on its head in so many ways right now with P Diddy, and just all of this crazy stuff. Like, that level of uncertainty creates just an anxiousness sometimes when clients are walking in. And I think you as the leader help dictate what those conversations look like, how often those conversations are happening, how they're directed. Are you the one kind of like creating that conversation? Are you taking it and then moving on from it? Or is it this constant narrative that's happening within your brand all the time? And if you have a certain political viewpoint or a political thought or something that's slightly controversial, are you okay as a leader saying something that could very well upset maybe your current team members, maybe clients? I just think, I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't do. I'm saying these are things that you really need to think about on what direction you want your culture to be.
It all comes back to culture.
It does.
And what you want your culture to be, what's acceptable, what's not
Yeah,
acceptable.
because some cultures are cool with it. They'll talk about it all day. It just depends.
Some are. Yeah, for sure. But you know what? I think our job is to, as David Wagner said, to be a day maker. And that's our job. And so spread the positivity, the happiness, the joy, because people come to us to feel better.
Right.
And so let's take that not just from physical appearance, but on the inside as well as that outside. And let's see what we can do to become day makers.
I think that's a great way to end the episode.
There you go.
Well, you're my day maker, Jill.
Hey, thanks. You're mine.
All right, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Culture Curators podcast. Please like, comment, follow, and subscribe.